Interview with Mr. Perry Jewell concerning the compulsory vote. It is known that in Australia it is compulsory to cast your ballot at every level of Australian government. Some people say that that's democratic, some people not. You're one of those who says not. Why do you say that?
The compulsory vote is Clayton's democracy. I can use that phrase in Australia. The compulsion to vote cannot possibly, within a Bull's law, be considered democratic. The average Australian sadly thinks that this is the way in all the democracies of the world. The reality is that in today's world, as far as I know, there are only 3 countries with a compulsory vote, one being Belarus, which is still a fragment of the old Soviet Union. The other is Belgium, that looks as if it's about to fragment into 2 ethnic-based countries because the compulsory vote ultimately destroys any cohesive form of government. And the third, sadly, is Australia. And there are various spin-offs from this, but fundamentally, when you vote under duress, not only can that be considered undemocratic, but anything that results from it can be termed to be illegal because any agreement entered under duress, which is compulsion, is not legally binding.
Okay, well, if that's the case, obviously someone or some group in Australia benefits from the idea of the compulsory vote. Who benefits and how do they benefit?
There are 2 major groups of beneficiaries, if you want to call them groups, and primarily the people who have allowed this to totally destroy any concept of democracy in Australia are in actuality the 2-party preferred recipients of the votes. They are served up as the 2-party preferred by the other major beneficiary, which of course are the news media, the newspapers, the televisions, all the people that take and charge for the adverts that these parties place in them. If we had reality and truth combined, they would, in all honesty, have to call this not the 2-party preferred vote, but the 2-party compelled vote. And Australians are well known for their belief in fairness and a fair go. And I think this has become perhaps the greatest misinformation propaganda that has ever been inflicted on an entire nation. And that is that this nation is a democracy. It is not. And the 2 major beneficiaries are the news media, who are quite happy to help keep triggering elections, and of course the 2 parties that have misgoverned and misled this country from the Whitlam government onwards. Then, so what happens is this. People say, well, how can that be? When you go to vote and cast your compulsory vote, you allocate the possibility of electoral reimbursement, that is financial reimbursement. We'll round figure it to $2.50 with your Senate vote and $2.50 for your House of Representatives vote. That means that the compelled voter goes out and allocates $5 electoral reimbursement to the party that they vote for. Because new parties have virtually no chance of winning, people go out and they vote for what they regard as the least worst party. And hence we have the 2-party supposedly preferred vote. Now, last election, round figure 12 million people were compelled to go out and vote. That meant they allocated $60 million. So who received that $60 million? And who got the use of the $60 million? So what's happened is that the parties get the use of it. They can actually take out on credit advertising with the news media. The news media get the money because the parties have spent money buying advertising. They're given free editorial. So the news media present as credible people's policies and parties that have already proved they're not credible. The new parties that end up with virtually no electoral reimbursement get blown away each time, and people have basically cremated their money and their resources trying to overthrow a system that is inherently undemocratic. So because of the compulsory vote, effectively we are compelled to vote to internationalist parties, and we are in lockstep to national destruction, because internationalists do not believe in nations, they believe in international causes. And hence we have multiculturalism, globalism, internationalism, whatever you want to call it, all of which is anathema and end-time destruction to nationalism and our nation.
If you consider, therefore, that the system in Australia of compulsory vote is undemocratic, how can we have more democracy in our political order?
It's a topic by itself, but essentially what is known as CIR, that is Citizens Initiated Referendum and Recall, probably one of the most civilised countries on earth and always amongst the top indicators of any index of prosperity and stability, is Switzerland. They have it at all levels of government. We have 3 levels of government, and we need to introduce Citizens Initiated Referendum and Recall into Australia and have it written into our constitution. So the short answer is that is how we will control the politicians, and we will decide whether we become party to international treaties and obligations, many of which do not suit this country. Whether it's the immigration program, the refugee program, we the people will control it. And if we find that inadvertently we've elected a liar, somebody who basically promises one thing and has blatantly broken their promise. I remember someone once saying there will be no GST. When you elect a liar, it means that mid-term, without a general or local election, you can trigger just an election in that seat where that representative who can be proven to be a liar before his voters and his electorate can actually be removed from that position. And it works also, it mitigates against the creation of career politicians, people who come into politics at a very young age with no real life experience, who feel that they can make a good living in politics, and in the end they become serial politicians. Whereas Switzerland, for instance, I've never met anyone who could tell me the name of the president of the Confederation of Swiss States. They're a confederacy, yet they run very, very democratically. They've chosen not to fight in World War I and II and Vietnam and Korea. It's not that the people are cowards, they're the heaviest armed country in Europe, pro rata. Every male is in the military reserve, required to keep a military weapon at home with ammunition, attend to a range a couple of times a year. Coincidentally, they've got the lowest housebreaking rate in Europe. They've got 4 language groups who live peacefully cheek by jowl, but they don't take immigrants from places that they regard as being incompatible with their local populations. Structurally, it's a system to be admired. Tough little nation, somehow they're always in the top indicators of any index of prosperity, health, peace, pleasant way to live, and yet they have no resources. Snowbound 4 months a year, no sea, so there's no free fish, no natural resources, and yet somehow they function as a good, cohesive, happy little nation, despite the fact they've got 4 language groups there. Can't we learn from them? I think we can.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jewell.